come back for the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wild.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the 81 All Out podcast. This is Siddhartha Vaidyanathan at Sidvi on Twitter. And I'm glad to be joined today by three guests, two regulars, and one of whom is joining the podcast for the first time. I'll introduce all of them, but let me start with introducing Himanish Ganju, who is a friend of the podcast, has been a long-time listener, also a really sharp cricketing brain, cricket fan who contributes a lot of incisive articles to ESPN Cricinfo, and also somebody who has an original take on the game. Also an active tweeter. I'll link his Twitter handle. Big foodie, Coke Studio fan, etc. You can follow him for all updates. Hey Himanish, thanks so much for joining.
Hey Sidvi, thanks so much for calling me. I've been a long-time fan and I'm glad to be here finally. And thanks for the very long and kind introduction. Yeah.
Absolutely. I must let our listeners know that Himanish is also, he has a very accomplished professional sort of life on the side in the field of astrophysics. But of course, we are talking about more in terms of cricket. So yeah. I didn't bring that bit in. Also, we have our regulars, Ashoka, who is at ABVan on Twitter. Regular listeners know Ashoka well, the voice of the masses, the troller of KD, as I introduced him on the last podcast. Hi, Ashoka. How's it going?
Thanks, man. Thanks for having the confidence to include me in this chat, in which you're going to talk about stats, and I'm going to talk about the real thing, which is emotions. But anyways, let's see how this goes.
That is precisely why you are in the podcast, because it is, as we know, numbers are not everything. We will come to that, of course. Kartikeya, the other guest on the show, Kartikeya Date at Cricketing View on Twitter, who, again, regular listeners of the podcast are familiar with. Cricket writer, substacker, tweeter, and also a very, an academic on the side, but we never bring that aspect of KD in there. So, hi, KD, how are you?
Hi. So, you're really, really, really courageous, man. The three listeners we have left after last time, you decided to inflict this on them now. So, good for you.
No, that is okay. As you know, we don't, our listeners, the three listeners, even if we have three listeners, they are so engaged in our conversations that we are fine. We can talk about what we want to talk about. So, yeah, again, today is going to be a general-ish topic, nothing specific on any game or series, but something that I think is really important to discuss, especially in this day and age when a lot of it is coming into cricket. So we're going to talk about data and stats and counting and, what it generally means in cricket. The concept of data and statistics are these are all, they have different meanings in different contexts. There is the mathematical context, the academic context and everything. But when it comes to sport, these terms begin to take completely different meanings. And so if you say data, some cricket fans think of it in some way, some of them think of it in some other way. When you say stats, statistics, you think of it in some way. So we thought it's good to understand what data really means in sport, what it can mean, and the various sort of misconceptions about how we use data in sport, and also the opportunities, because now we're living in an age where more and more data is available, and how teams and players are using it, and how we as fans can improve our appreciation of the game by learning more about it. Anyway, a regular reminder to our listeners, 81 All Out is now in the book republishing space. We recently republished Cricket Beyond the Bazaar by Mike Coward, a classic work written in 1990 about Australia's tours to India, from the 1930s onwards till through the 1980s. It's focused mainly on the 1980s. Book by Mike Coward. Please pick it up. I'll give the links to it. Before that, we published War Minus the Shooting by Mike Marquesi, classic work again about the 1996 World Cup. travelogue, cricket book, sort of political commentary, social commentary. It's almost everything that you would want in a work of sports literature. So pick that up too. I'll give those links. So yeah, we can start any which way we want, but maybe since we have Himanish here, let me bring you in first, Himanish. So, maybe set the stage about data in sports. I mean, in your professional life, you work with a lot of data and a lot of complex data, I'm sure, in astrophysics. But talk about what data means to you in the cricketing context and sporting context, and how you think it really works to help us learn about cricket better.
See, mostly like in cricket, data has been a descriptive exercise. So in the sense that since we come from the English tradition, we've used these numbers like averages and strike rates to describe players, but it's not really gone beyond that. And that's how it's been for most of cricket history till the 2000s and the 2010s. Now it's taking on a different dimension, right? Because now you have these T20 leagues and you want to win. So instead of descriptive data, you really want data which really analyzes performance. So that's been a sea change in the last 10, 15 years. And with the coming of Twitter and all, it's obviously percolated into the popular consciousness a lot more than usual. So you had things like averages before, but now you have things like, runs above average and impact and these things. So it's a very interesting space right now for data. And right now, people are just beginning to understand how actual data can describe the game. Instead of just, this guy averages this much and so on and so forth. We had a very minimalistic and romantic sort of concept of data before this. But right now, it's a very interesting space in the sense that, people are really trying to explore कि अच्छा मतलब left arm के against ऐसा है and off break के against ऐसा है. So people are really trying to dig in and, push context into data a lot more. So yeah, it's very fascinating right now.
So just a quick one about you're saying with the T20s and teams want to win. You mean that teams are looking for that edge, extra edge?
Yeah, teams are looking for the edge. Teams are looking for numbers to describe the game better, right? So that's why. And this is just because teams want to win, because there's money involved, right? So now, yeah. So the context of data has changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years. Yeah.
Got it. Kartikeya, your thoughts on this? I know you have a lot of it. So yeah, if you can sort of distill what data means to you and what you think data actually means in sport and how it can help us talk about the game better.
Honestly, I don't know what data means. I mean, what is, if you say that someone made a 80 in 100 balls, is that data? Is that just a score? Or what are you doing? Do you consider that data? It's a description within a model, and the model is prescribed by the laws of cricket. All data is a selection based on some intuition or some definition or some set of relationships. So and cricket comes with this. In the laws of cricket, you specify that there are runs and there are wickets, there are boundaries and there are earned runs, and there are wides and no balls, and there are 6 balls in an over, there are 600 balls in a one-day match, and so on and so forth. Cricket turns into a game because you count things. If you don't count things, there's no cricket yet. It's just some random guy throwing a ball and another random guy hitting it with a stick. Depending on where you are in the world, at what point in history, you will either end up on a stage or in an asylum, if you don't count and you do that. But people count, and that's what makes it a game. There are definitions and relationships, and there is a model of relationships which defines, okay, this is the context. And what I think what people refer to as data is just an attempt to record that and count it, use it systematically, as opposed to in some ad hoc fashion. And most of the arguments, most of these fights which keep happening, most of the nonsense you hear about, why data doesn't tell the whole story, is basically between people who don't want to count and people who do count. That's basically all there is to it, as far as I'm concerned.
Let me just quickly say, we have the headline for this podcast already. Kartikeya Date, I don't know what data means. So that is itself over. Now we can continue with the rest of the podcast.
No, I do agree. It is an argument between sensible people who don't want to spend their lives counting and some some guy with like an accident, like a coconut fell on his head or whatnot, who keeps counting and telling people what the numbers are. Like, who cares what the numbers are, man? I'm just like tired of life. I'm just sitting and watching a cricket match. And I say, this guy is a great batsman. And suddenly this guy comes here. One other guy comes and says, no, you see, he has a strike rate of 110. Who cares? You just divided A by B and multiplied it into 100. I don't care. That's not what pays the subscription. So, yeah, I do agree with KD there. It is actually an argument between people who are right and people who count. So people who are right are saying that this is the correct way of viewing a sport. But people who count, they are the ones who say that they have found a new way. So the onus is on them to explain what is this new way and whether it is applicable or it's just some other cookie nonsense that these guys are propagating.
Okay. But I think is
that inflammatory enough of an opening? Tell me that.
Oh yeah. Perfect. No. Now you can continue. Yeah. Okay. No, what I want to say is actually through that tongue-in-cheekness,
This guy last week spent like 2 whole days shouting at Kohli for like scoring slowly and yelling at everybody who replied, saying Kohli is an idiot and Kohli is this and Kohli is that. He's very slow. He slows down after so many balls and this and that. Just want to put that on the record.
Yeah, that is exactly true. Because as you say, Ashoka, I mean, as much as cricket is an escapism, I mean, first of all, I know there was a lot of tongue-in-cheekness there, but as much as cricket is an escapism, even within that escapism, there is a lot of counting going on. Like, even when you say he's a great player, you are like, you will say he is greater than that because there will be all that kind of thing also that comes. So anyway, but I think you brought up like the interesting point about what the battle really is. I mean, it's just, maybe you guys can obviously pitch in, but I feel like it's eventually boils down to the rationality versus irrationality debate, right? Like some people just watch sport for escapism and they're like, I don't care. I mean, it's like, I don't want it to be an imitation of life. I want it to be something else. I want to suspend my belief in many cases. While other people are like, no, I mean, it is very much a game and it has laws, it has rules and you count and we are counting. No, eventually it is down to that. No,
I think the to be serious for a second here, but I think both exist and both need not be contradictory things. One need not have to negate the other. If you're watching sports for joy, everybody is watching sports for joy. But that's not the point the people who point out the stats make. The point of stats is they are a method of directly observing the game and measuring results, right?
Summarizing the game.
Yeah, summarizing the game as per the laws that are laid out, right? That has no bearing on how gorgeous a shot a batsman can hit or how beautiful an in-swinger or an out-swinger a bowler can bowl. So if you're measuring that, you add additional information to your armory. Okay, that doesn't mean that is a commentary on a player or commentary on your fandom or tearing down your sacrosanct gods or whatnot. It is just an observation, right? That can exist along with your myths. If you can have the capabilities of having 2 contradictory thoughts in your head, that actually fine. I mean, you can always say, I love watching Babar Azam bat. Right? And you can say that he's not fit for T20s. Maybe that's not the format for him. You can say both, right? And be rational. Now, the problem is, if you say one, the other sounds irrational to a person who's holding that opinion. And that's why all this argument comes in, right? If Babar is having the greatest cover drives and the best back foot game, he obviously has to be a great T20 batsman. That's not true. That the numbers don't bear that out. Right? You can say that.
I mean, he doesn't even have to be a great test batsman. There have been enough players with the great cover drives who have not been great. Great cricketers. Yeah.
So, and there's a foolish dichotomy also online that if you appreciate the poetry and beauty of cricket, you can't appreciate the numbers and vice versa, right? Which is also foolish, right? Yeah. And that's what I think Ashoka was also saying, that, you can hold both these thoughts in your head. You can say that Babar Azam plays a good cover drive, but still say that he's not a good T20 player. Or I can say that this was a good in-swinger, but I can tell you that day he bowled something with 3 degrees of swing, which was more than this. You know,
And another
people are incapable of holding that. Those two thoughts.
Another thing I wanted to dispute right here is that very statement. Stats don't tell the whole story. Stats are not meant to tell you stories, right? Stories exist on their own with an opening, a middle, and an end, right? Stats are there to describe some section of a game or a complete game altogether. So this whole idea that stats enhance your understanding of the game says that you have the story underlying story on which there is stats, which helps the story propagate. But that's not the stats are for. Stats are not there to enhance your understanding of the story, right? That's a completely different thing. You can have as many stories as you want. You can believe whatever you want, but stats are there to describe a game which you observe, and based on whatever methods that you have, you analyze it.
I think the most famous quote here about this stats don't tell the entire story is the famous line by Neville Cardis, right? Where he says the scoreboard is an ass. Which is he's saying that, okay, forget the scoreboard now, just listen to what I'm saying. Forget the game. But now I will tell you basically what is happening. It's almost like he's coming up with a higher truth there. Anyway,
but there is an appeal to believing that stories matter, right? Because everywhere else we are believing stories. Right?
Yeah. Story, of course. I mean, like we discussed in that two podcasts previously about storytelling versus the game. They are two different categories. So, KD.
Counting is not optional in games. That's what counting is what makes it a game. You can say that, okay, stats don't tell the whole story. Fine. But the record does describe the whole game. Then there is nothing in the game outside of that record. Nothing else happened that was not recorded in the score. That's just true. That doesn't mean that you don't care about aesthetics or stuff like that. But aesthetics and virtuosity are two different things. They're not the same thing. If you are asking, well, who's the better player, or if you're asking why did X win and Y lose, then the fact that you are talking about a game means that you have to answer that question according to the rules of that game, not according to the rules of some story you want to tell otherwise. That's not on, no? We used to do that because who cares? It doesn't matter what you say. The stakes are low, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean it's true, no? Sure, lots of people say lots of things. So what? It's not what they say is not true.
Okay, but I just want to get to the point that you're making, that when you say stats and data, it's not like you're looking at any thing that is highly complex. You're saying that even like a basic thing like bowling a ball and scoring a run is itself data, right? Or whatever is itself like part of this.
You said it's one ball and one run, no? So you're not saying it's some indeterminate number of balls and some indeterminate number of runs. So you're not saying it's like a hot air balloon and something else. You are specifying what it is, no?
That itself is counting. It's fundamentally based on counting. Yeah,
it's a false opposition. One of the things is real, which is counting, and the other is imaginary. The other exists entirely, in my opinion, because people don't want to count and they do not like being told things by people who do count.
And numbers don't tell the story thing.
That may be unfriendly and unpleasant and whatever, but it's true. You can take this part out if you want, but basically what it is that I don't. What is the? If you disregard the competition, what's left in the game?
No. And the concept of numbers don't tell the whole story is basically, it's a competition between counting versus selective counting. So, for example, if I have a period in Test cricket where it's difficult to bat, and there someone averages 35. Now, I know that the context says that it's hard to average 35. Now, there is some record in the records of that era which can help me quantify this. Now, those who will not quantify this will say कि इसमें context नहीं है. So it's always a matter of counting versus selective counting. If you count the record properly, you will be able to incorporate that context into this record. And that's all it is. And that's why people say stats don't tell the whole story sometimes, So it's all about counting the right things and counting them the right way and combining them in the right way to tell you something, right?
Look, yeah, but there's an important distinction here, which is that, usually when you say this, you hear like the people start arguing with you and give you like some bonkers examples, like, something from the business world or something from the world of medicine, something from the world of, I don't know, urban planning or something, But the point is that these are, cricket is not like those things. Cricket is well defined before it begins. Okay. And that definition is not disputed. It is not, nobody argues that a boundary is 4 runs. A boundary is 4 runs. Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees with all the laws of cricket. Those are not up for argument. Those are not up for debate. They do not have to be added to. They do not have to be subtracted from. They are complete and unambiguous, right? So as a world, cricket is amenable to records. I mean, sure, the problem comes with the problem of modeling and why modeling is difficult and why data is so, political and all of those things in all these other places is because in those other fields, like, if you're trying to describe, the socio-politics of a city or, something to do with cosmology or something to do with, some disease or something like that, then you have to make up the rules and then count. You have to do both of those things. That's what makes academics and scholarship so difficult. That's why it's research. But this is not research. I mean, cricket is already defined for you. All the rules are given to you. All the definitions are given to you. You don't have to make up anything. You don't even have to think about it. All you have to do is count. Okay, so it is a well-defined, complete, bracketed world, which is, I mean, it's the analogy to sort of examples from life or business or stuff are, there are no externalities in cricket like there are in those, to use like a term which economists really love. So that's a basic distinction. So yeah, it's true that if you tell me, for example, that the gross domestic product and the growth rate doesn't tell the whole story about the welfare of a society. That's true, because there is no claim that the gross domestic product or the growth rate are complete definitions of society, right? They describe something in society, but that's not true about the laws of cricket. No, the laws of cricket are a complete definition of cricket. So that's a distinction. And that's a distinction which almost nobody takes seriously.
No, I mean, talking from the, media perspective, since I was part of the media, full-time media, covering full-time cricket for 5 years, many years ago, I think a part of the reason is also, there are two reasons. One is that historically, what has been available has been the scorecard, right? I mean, and like, the traditional definitions of stats, which are the averages and strike rates and all, which was there. I think the part of the issue has been the non-availability of other like rigorous methods of counting things. Apart from the scorecard, I mean, apart from what they do, it's like the non-availability of, say, line, what length the bowler bowled or what line the bowler bowled or something historically. And number two, I also think it's like the sort of the difficulty of describing the game. Like, cricket is such a difficult game to observe and describe that, people, it's like, this is the sort of the path of least resistance. No, like if you can not count, like if you are on a daily job and if you have like a certain deadline, if you have to write something, you would obviously follow the path that, works for you at that point of time. And counting rigorously takes time and takes work and it's not easy, is what I'm saying.
Also, it's not intuitive, right? It is not intuitive, and it is against everything that sometimes makes sense. Like the previous point of whatever KD was telling in the previous podcast, like a batter who is 36 of 18 is doing worse than someone who was like 18 of 9 because he doesn't accelerate enough, and that is not a very intuitive point that you can only arrive by looking at the numbers and drawing your conclusions from that, right? You cannot do that, but just maybe you can do that particular point by observing, because that doesn't seem to have much formulas in it. It is just a rule that you tell people, but there are certain things that appear very counterintuitive to people, and that balk at them and say maybe
that is also a hard point to understand if you don't understand the dynamics of T20, right? Like for me, honestly, 4 or 5 years ago, I might have scoffed at that suggestion that 36 of 18 is worse than 18 of 9, because you have to have a certain sort of switch towards what the format is and what you're watching and the resources, and there are all these other dynamics that come into play, which I think takes some observation and takes some application.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, and it's not really, the counting is not really the important thing. The counting is just work. It's just legwork. And if you can write a program, then it's not a lot of work either. I mean, it's just, once you write a program, then it's actually a lot of fun to do on the weekends and stuff, if you're into that sort of stuff. But really the problem is like, you have to put the right question. Like, for example, if Jasprit Bumrah is playing 5 T20 matches and he goes for like 20, 40, 20, 40 and 32 in those 5 matches, then it's worth asking, like, why is there such a big range in what he's conceding? Is the quality of his bowling really fluctuating that much? And if it's not fluctuating, then given that it's not fluctuating, why are the outcomes so different? Right? And then you're updating, what you're doing really is you're updating your model, your understanding of the model of the contest. You're updating your understanding of what's really happening between bat and ball. That's what you're trying to understand, no?
No, but these are very high fundas. So first of all, we come from a culture of test cricket. So in test cricket, there is no incentive to especially track ball by ball data, for example. Like, it doesn't really add much to your understanding. Point 1. Point 2, we haven't had the technology to track line and length data before like 2005 or something. So we've not had the technology or the incentive to add layers to our counting, which is ball by ball data and tracking data, right? So it's only happening now. We've been far too comfortable with a system that doesn't rely on these things. And we continue to do those things because it's comfortable, right? So that's what the reason is, I think. We just haven't had the technology or the reason to count it like that, to count things like that.
Explain what you mean by saying there's no incentive to count ball by ball data in test cricket. There is, right?
I mean, see, in test cricket, the scorecard will almost tell you everything that you want, because the contest is very long, right? So like, you don't need to rely on counting, playing 10 balls against slow left arm or 10 balls against off break. The contest is long enough for the scorecard to be a good measure of the quality. So you don't really need ball by ball data. Of course you need it, but you haven't really needed it over the history of cricket. Whereas in T20, you really need it. So that's the whole point. So we've been comfortable with that, right? And that's what most journalists are comfortable with. That's what most fans and commentators are comfortable with. And it's a lot of work to, make that step forward and talk about ball by ball data or tracking data.
Is it fair to say that in a test match, when you see the scorecard and when you see Bumrah has 5 for 50 in, say, 10, 15 overs or whatever that he's bowled, then you have a general understanding of how good he has been.
Yeah.
But if you see the T20 scorecard and see Bumrah has 2 for 30 in 4 overs, you don't really know.
Yeah. So basically, if you take a sample of 10 tests and 10 T20s, the 10 test sample will give you a much surer signal of a quality of a batter or bowler, but not so with, the shorter format. So that's what it is. And yeah, had we had the technology to track length and line at that time, we would have done it, but we didn't have it because, yeah. So
yeah, but the technology part is all fine. I mean, okay, there are people who've done ball by ball records, and the tradition of maintaining scorecards and collecting scorecards has existed in years.
Yeah,
like Charlie Davis, I think, has been doing
but
it.
That's been a niche thing, right? So, for example, Cricinfo has ball by ball data for every match now, so they use it sometimes in their reports and all. So it's become a different thing now, right?
Yeah, but we are also a niche thing, Himanish. I mean,
true.
Look, the basic, and I'm going to keep resisting this idea that that data is somehow this amoral thing. It is not. The reason you look at the model is because you have regard for the player. Because frankly, it used to bother me. Like one day the guy makes like 2 in 7 balls, and he's the shittest guy since shit was invented. And the next day he makes 120 in 110 balls, and he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now, this bothered me. Like this account of a player seemed to me to have absolutely no regard for the player's skill or accomplishment. And on the other hand, you have these stories where you say that, okay, to get up to the level of being a test player, these guys have worked their backsides off from the time they're 11, and they worked so hard, and they're so skillful, and they're so extraordinarily good at what they do, right? So there's an obvious contradiction between these two descriptions, no? So that is what motivates the looking at the record, no? That's why I think the control figure that Cricinfo came up with, that's actually why they came up with it. I know for a fact, is, and they don't use it as much as they should, but it's a really, really elegant measurement. But that's what they are trying to, that's where it comes from, no? It comes from a regard for the skill. It comes from the fact that, hey, one day Jasprit Bumrah is not for 70, and the next day he's 5 for 50 in 2 consecutive test matches. Like, what's going on? Is it that one wicket is flat? Is he creating enough equal jeopardy in both cases? Is he not creating? How do you look into that? But you only look into it if you want to look into it. No, it's not like it's like, what is the motivation for making all these measurements? What is the motivation for doing all this counting? The motivation for doing all this counting is that there is something that you cannot explain and you want to explain. There's something that you want to understand and you can't understand. That's where it starts. It's not like, there's all this data now, and so, why not look into it? It's not like that. Because obviously there's all this data now and most people don't look into it. So, and the irony is that those who look into it, they get called robots.
Python merchant. No. What I was saying is this commentary depends on how your numbers, support or disprove the narrative that you want to see. So if Kohli tomorrow hits 100 or 50 balls, and I put out a stat saying his RA was plus 20 or something, then it'll be very good. RA is very nice. You see, Kohli is God now. If he hits
what is that?
or 40,
what does that mean, by the way? What does that stat mean?
This is runs above average.
Runs above average.
This guy has a Misbah measure, no? Yeah. So the same thing. So yeah. So if he scores 63 or 48, where he hit this 6 in the last over, which he did in the last match, that was a minus 14 innings. I did this yesterday. That was a minus 14 run innings. Now, if I put this out, I will get all sorts of, Python merchant, Excel merchant, robot, etc. So it all depends on what people want to believe and whether the number you're putting out actually, supports that or doesn't support that. And that's how fandom works. People are more wedded to emotions and perceptions than cold numbers. So that's how it works. And that's how it is.
There is a super specialization of this, bizarre behavior that stats only are stats. You look at the stats only when your team loses. To pour over and find out why the team lost. When your team wins, and if a batsman that 63 or 48 came in a win, right? But it was still less than 8 runs per over innings in a 9-run over innings chase. You took 40% of that innings, or 40%. So you took that and you played like less than 8 runs per over. At that point in time, he's not slow, right? But if India had lost that match, right, by 5 runs, people have said, see, this guy was batting slowly. So the same stats mean two different things based on the result. And the attitude of people towards stats also change based on the result. Like in a victory, you don't have to look too hard into things.
The fact is that there is also this terminological baggage, right? That a lot of sports and cricket have. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, I know a lot of your posts are, you use terms that are very, very normal to use in the mathematical sense. Like, I think yesterday you posted saying something about a fluke, or you will say something about a player having luck, or you will say something. But the sort of preconceptions about these words like fluke, luck, randomness are all like so ingrained that it's hard for people to divorce it from skill. And so the moment you say that Kohli was lucky in this innings, the automatic response is that they think that you're actually running him down.
Yeah, they do. But the thing is that, see, if you're not interested in describing the game and if you're not interested in understanding the game, then all you have left is either glorification or slighting. So everything that is said is either, to the greater glory of some player X or to slight some player X. There's nothing else left, because there isn't really a game that you're interested in at that point. So that's why it's impossible to talk to these people, But
no, because this discourse has also been polarized.
Yeah, I mean, partisanship is sort of arises out of ignorance. No, partisanship is...
And it's become so extreme also now. Like, if you say anything against a Kohli innings, that means you're saying he's total shit. Completely shit. But that's how people work nowadays, because discourse is polarized like that. Yeah.
No, I think players
I live in the hope that the vast majority of people who don't say anything are actually, generally sane.
No, but do you think players can do their part by also bringing in these words into their own vocabulary that they're adding? I mean, if Virat Kohli, for instance, were to come after scoring 100 and say that, yes, I batted well, but I was also very lucky, which he has also occasionally said, and players also occasionally say that. But to make terms like luck and other things more acceptable and not like, things that are putting down a player.
Look, I'll tell you something I've been told by one or two players a long time ago. It is that basically they want to get out of those news conferences by saying as little as possible and making as little news as possible.
That's true.
So they're never going to do that. They're good. If they get asked a leading question, they're going to go with it, say as little as possible and get out.
In fact, Cricket Australia and the England board have a system by which the young players are trained to spout cliches and to say almost nothing. I mean, one of the media managers I spoke to many, many years ago said, my job is to make sure that the players say a lot without saying anything. So that is how you have to train the player. Basically,
Dhoni was brilliant at this, no? I mean...
Yeah, Dhoni was perfect because he used to also crack these nice little witty wisecracks and all, which people lapped up and then they didn't care about what he said anyway. I mean, Dhoni went to the extent of calling a journalist from the crowd next to him to sit next to him and then ask him counter questions.
Do you have a brother or a son? Do you have a brother or a son who can play for India? Like Dhoni was, yeah.
He was also the greatest project manager, PMP certified project manager cricket has ever seen. Implement the process, the results will take care of themselves. He said this in active voice, passive voice. So he never gave what the process is, right? What are the steps, right? And then for us to evaluate if that process is there or not, is it good or not? Why should you evaluate? No,
But I also don't blame them, No, I also don't blame them because the structure of the press conference is so bad. Like that whole concept is terrible. That should be abolished actually because it doesn't add anything to anybody's understanding of what is going on.
Yeah.
There's another side to this, which is that, players actually have a lot of skin in the game. And, cricket is a brutal sport. When we talked about this came up last time also, which is that, selection is almost all by definition unfair. And so they have a lot at stake and they have a lot to lose. And, I don't at all blame them for being cagey or saying whatever they have to stay in, and it goes to like the application of this data also. Like, for example, a long time ago, I did a thing for the Cricket Monthly back in the day. And, I talked to John Buchanan about the use of data. And what he basically said is that, look, he was giving this example, okay, and this will maybe tie into some of the things you put in the agenda, which is that he said, okay, I want to instruct the bowler to bowl a certain length and a certain line to a certain field to that particular batting pair, which is at the crease, and I want them to do it, and I want to be able to instruct them to do it at the start of their spell. And then after the end of the match, I want to be able to evaluate them, not based on like how many runs they conceded, but how well they did what they were supposed to do. So for example, if I tell a bowler to bowl a certain line and length to a certain field, and the bowler goes for like 6-10 runs in 2 overs, right? That's okay, because I know at least that the bowler did what was expected, right? And as opposed to that, if the bowler doesn't do what I tell him to do, and he bowls a half volley and the batsman misses it, and he gets like 6 for 1 in those 2 overs, then in the long run, the bowler's doing badly, right? In the long run, the signal from the bowler is giving me is that he's not able to control his bowling and he's not able to follow instructions, right? So apparently, players resist this kind of instruction because it introduces this new type of accountability on them, as opposed to sort of, the Ian Chappell view, which is that the coach is, the line he says, the coach is there for
taking the players from the hotel room to the ground.
Yeah. So these are two different views, but I think especially in the franchise leagues, because they are making money decisions, I think they are much more amenable to, studying players' records and, seeing what's valuable and what's not. I mean, there's a reason why Cheteshwar Pujara is not acquired by IPL franchises.
No, and I remember that piece. If you remember, KD, I was the editor on that piece back when I used to work in the Cricket Monthly. And it was...
Osman, that's true.
Yeah, so data ball it was called, and it was a really good exploration. I'll link it, and that accountability piece keeps coming up over and over because if you see that documentary that came out about that Mumbai Indians documentary, what's it called? Fever Pitch? No, I forgot what it's
Cricket
called. Cricket Fever. It's like, you get very little about actually what is going on behind the scenes in that. I mean, you don't hardly get anything from Rohit Sharma. You hardly get anything from the Shane Bond coaching staff, anything, which obviously is guarded. They don't want to let out so much. But the one thing that you do see is that Mahela, who is their coach, is pissed off, not because they have lost the game, but is pissed off that they haven't followed instructions. That he doesn't care that they actually lost and did whatever. He's like, you were supposed to do this, and that you can see it's like frustrating him. He's like, it doesn't matter to me what happened, but it matters to me that you didn't follow this instruction.
And the thing is, so like the impression I have is that this data is really tracking data, for example, it really puts the actual performance on the map. Like a bowler might think that he's bowling full, but you can show him that you're not bowling that full, boss. And that is for the first time showing players what's happening on the pitch, right? Whereas they've always played without that information. So there is a resistance to that. And what I've heard from people is that they have this reaction that, oh shit, I didn't know this was happening. So, it's happening for the first time in cricket professionally as well, because for the first time you can show them where the ball is going and so on. So obviously there's a lot of resistance to it. Yeah.
No, that's a great point. In fact, Bharat Arun brought that up on his podcast that we did with him. He said that, very often a player did not even realize that he was overcompensating with his length. So he would, a bowler like Shami would bowl a really full ball, and then because he was driven for 4, he would automatically compensate with a shorter length. But he didn't know he was doing that. So he had to be shown the clips and see, this is how the next ball happened. So you need to, that is the shift that players struggle to make sometimes. But when they do, they end up doing really well.
When you show concrete data to them, it really, drives the point home. Instead of a coach just telling them, ki ye ho raha hai, do this, don't do that. If you show them the length map, then they'll actually, think about it because they have it right there, in cold numbers. So it's making an impact, is what I've heard.
But the sort of let's call it, for want of a better phrase, the anti-data constituency is huge, and not just in cricket, but even in more mature sports like football, where there's so much more money involved and there's so much more so much more at stake, and there's the sort of the football data industry is so much more sophisticated than the cricket data industry, right? But you look at even someone like Guardiola will say oh, we don't really pay much attention to data. He'll say that in some throwaway answer in some press conference, and then it will get quoted back week in and week out for years. But at the same time, he gives instructions to his players about where he wants them to be positioned, how he wants them to be positioned, how he wants them to move relative to the ball, what shape he wants them to maintain, what technique he wants them to maintain. And, at the same time, someone like Thierry Henry will tell a story that in one game when he was at Barcelona, he didn't follow instructions. And even though he scored a goal in the first half, he got hooked at halftime because he wasn't following instructions. So that is data. That is the insistence on a systematic method is basically what data is. And nobody does that more than Guardiola, for instance. The whole idea of this is a better way to play football than this other way is basically a data-based proposition. Now, that data may not be in terms of equations or whatever, but it is there. In the same way beforehand, old timers will tell you stories in Test cricket about how, they used to say, for example, that Steve Waugh used to stand at second slip and he used to watch batsmen who he had come to know really well, like, Tendulkar or Alex Stewart or somebody like that. And he could watch them and he could sort of tell with remarkable precision that, oh, today they're going to make runs. Today they're not going to make runs. And he would invariably be right. Now, what's happening there? He's watching for some information, right? He's watching for how they're moving. He's watching for how well they're meeting the balls. He's watching for how early they're seeing the ball. He's watching for all of these things. And, it's not, there's a whole sort of urge to say, to mysticize this insight as some sort of, inspiration which comes from some unknown place. It doesn't come from some unknown place. It comes from experience. It comes from observation, and it comes from a lot of systematic observation and a lot of careful observation. It comes from caring about what's going on, basically.
Yeah, you brought up Guardiola, right? The direct connection here is, the cricketing connection is Dhoni, who is seen as this, basically, that Dhoni is like this instinctive kind of player, apparently, who is not really who doesn't really care about data or stats and all. But the fact is that whatever he has learned over the years as a player, and by keeping and from behind the stumps and by observing and watching, all that is data, no? All that is his. He may not be somebody who is poring over Excel sheets and, analyzing stuff the way you are. I don't know. Maybe he is also. Maybe he does. He has said that, he does go to, he does talk to bowling coaches and batting coaches about, doing when they do their video analysis and all that. He does all that. He's not silly. He also wants to win. But at the same time, even if he's not as particular about it as, say, a Rohit Sharma or whoever else, other captains going around, the fact is that he's also relying on data in a different way. I mean, he's relying on what he has seen or what he has experienced and what he feels. He may be thinking of a under 16 game that he played where something similar happened. And so he's going to try and do the same thing. So it's just that data can be used in different ways, right?
I mean, it is. I mean, it is basically, I really, really didn't want to go into this here, but basically it is what a certain branch of statistics would call basically Bayesian updating, no? And Himanish can talk about the rest of this because I'm not going.
I don't do Bayesian cosmology, but yeah. But yeah, true. Like he has his priors and he updates his priors when he gets information. So he has a record and he has some sort of conclusions based on that record in his head. He just doesn't do it with numbers and with people, but he knows, so that's his way of using data. Now, it would be more concrete if he used numbers, for example, surely, but that's his way of using data. So it's not like he doesn't use data. He just uses whatever conclusions data can give you. He has them already because he's played so much cricket. He's watched so many guys play, so he knows things, right? So that's what it is. So like people don't understand that.
And also this whole, as far as I'm concerned, and Katie coined it as the anti-data constituency, but a large section of the problem, large part of the problem for them seems to be from the modeling rather than the data. So every time like a CSK wins the IPL, the thing will be, see what all you guys, who know data, you said they're this, they're that, but they won the IPL. Or if like CricViz says that this team, this team, these are the 4 teams that are likely to make the semi-finals. And then if only 2 of those teams make it, then people will be like, see, what is this? What does your data say now? But that is a modeling question. That is not a data question, no.
And people confuse data with soothsaying. No, like if I say tomorrow that Kohli has an expected average of this much, then if he scores 0, people will say, what happened to this? So people want you to be a soothsayer and not a statistician by definition. And that's the issue.
So wait, discourse. Are you saying, so let me put this to test. If I say on May 2nd, if Suresh Raina bats, regardless for the team that he bats, he hits a century. Am I being a soothsayer or am I being a statistician? Because I feel that
you are being
because I have a data point. Why? I have a data point of more than 0, which is 1. Why should
Which is not a good signal, no. Which is not a good signal. So that's what you haven't applied the rules of statistics to your data point. Had you known the rules, you would have said that 1 data point is bullshit. So I won't use.
You guys are making up the rules, man. I just told you a solid data point. And then you said, not enough. This is the problem with these guys, man. People who do data and stats,
Excel
if you give them 1 data point, it's not enough. You need to give them 100.
You need many.
How can Suresh Raina play through 100 May 2s, man? It's not possible.
I think we need to start getting filters for this. Like Cricinfo filters have to have the specific dates, like in May 2nd. Who has the best average in IPL on May 2nd? I want to know that immediately.
May 2nd.
Because this is like a niche, a branch of statistics called numerology. But these guys have not come to that level. I mean, they will one day upgrade themselves. But let's keep that discussion for the other day. Let's just talk about basic arithmetic right now.
No, but this whole prediction versus description is a fundamental distinction, right? Like just because you're counting things doesn't mean that you can tell what is going to happen in the next game.
This is especially problematic in cricket. In cricket, because you don't have too much signal, you play very it's very random because you play in different conditions. You don't play enough games. So the predictive value of cricket numbers is still quite bad. And I don't know why people think it's good or like people expect it to be good. It's not very good. Yeah.
So like even IPL, right? Yeah. I mean, how many, the number of games they play, I mean, it's probably like nothing.
14, yeah.
What can IPL tell you? Like even a player like, say, imagine Dhoni who has played like through almost all IPLs. Like it's still less. It's still so much lesser than comparatively to any other sport, right?
The point is that in cricket, we don't yet have biomechanical data. We don't have full Hawkeye data. And things change. Cricket is a very mechanically complex game, right? So someone like Pant, who's had two bumper seasons in 2018 and 19. Now the IPL is a 14-game phase separated by 1 year. So next season, he'll come back and not score. So things happen, it's very complicated. And the current data we have doesn't account for that. So it can't be predictive. It can be to a certain extent, but it can't really be predictive, especially in T20. Like, it's very hard. Baseball season, each team plays 100 plus games, right? So they can actually use data, 160 games. So they can actually use data to say something about something, right? 14 games is nothing. Like, it's nothing. You can't make any predictions based on it.
And the next season, things can be so different. Like suddenly they'll play in UAE or something. Yeah. Then there's no correlation between the two.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. But I mean, I think the sort of the nullificationist point that, if you say that, this is the favored expectation in this situation, and if the minority event occurs, then I said that the minority event is possible. I just said that it's less likely than the other event. So I didn't say that it wouldn't happen. I said it was less likely to happen. Okay? And that is it. And it is true that it is less likely to happen based on the past, whatever we know so far. And we know that whatever we know so far, the past does sort of describe the possibilities of the future reasonably well in cricket. So it's true. There are upsets, no? And, it's the same thing with the fluke thing, no? I mean, if a team wins by 3 runs, it's so close to losing that very, very few things need to go wrong for the win to turn into a defeat. This is not some controversial, complex observation. But it upsets people when you point out that, the 3-run win is a fluke. It is a fluke.
But I think the issue is that people look at cricket as a story, right? Fundamentally. So there is no scope for uncertainty and there is scope for design. So everything is by design, like an author wrote it, right? So that's how they think of people as characters and cricket as a story. So the elements of luck and predictability and uncertainty are not there. And people would like to believe that these are stories because people, think of games in that way and think of emotions in that way. So this whole concept of like uncertainty, skill, luck, these are not allowed in a constructed universe by an author, right? So that's the issue.
No, and it's also that, you're right about the fact that they look at it as a story, a lot of people, but it's also that many refuse to intuitively concede that luck has a component in the fact that somebody bowled a certain ball at a certain over towards, at a certain stage of the game, or, hit that shot, whatever. I mean, that component itself needs to go away. The luck is totally fine when you talk about like a dropped catch. That seems to be accepted, that, okay, when you're dropped, you're lucky. But not necessarily when the ball doesn't go, like every ball obviously cannot go from the middle of the bat exactly where every batter wants. People know that. But still that luck component becomes this blind spot that people are unwilling to.
No, I mean, even play and misses, man. Like those are the most common things in all formats of the game. A play and a miss. Any other day that could take an edge and that would be the end of the innings. In some other days that will be like 300, the batsman will score 300. You will forget all the play and misses. Like he will play and miss when he's on 2 or 35 or 300. But that will immediately go out of your head as a non-event. But that is an event that carries a probability, non-zero probability of a dismissal before it happened. Once it happened, okay, batsman is not out. But at any stage, the batsman could have been out, and that would have been the end of the innings, and a different story would have come out of it. No?
I think this is also down to the ease of observing some events and the relative lack of ease of observing other events. Like a dropped catch is something you clearly observe, right? It got dropped. But the fact that a ball deviated 0.2 degrees instead of 0.1 degrees and missed the edge, is not very easy to sort of compute and to observe. So lucky events are classified as the ones we can see as lucky or unlucky, right? Where it's harder to observe something like a ball missing or catching the edge or whatever.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. That and it's almost like, a lot of the play and misses tend to go down as this to the skill of the batter. Because sometimes you'll see a batter edges a ball, he sort of edges it and it drops short of the fielder. But the automatic thing is, the commentators also, the first thing they will say is that he loosened his bottom hand. And so it seems that there is a skill to that happening. When
some of it is also luck. Some of it is obvious.
But there's also luck. Yeah.
So if you're playing Pat Cummins on a moving pitch in Australia and he's bowling 90% of his balls on the off stump, they are moving around here and there, you don't know. You have to play on luck. You have to defend your off stump and then pray to God that you don't get out. That's how it works. And players know this, right? It's not about Pujara is not skilled enough or Kohli is not skilled enough. In certain situations, it has to be on luck because you can't do anything as a human. You are limited mechanically by what you can do. And there's random variation of the pitch and so on. So there is a lot of luck here. But because we like to look at things as stories, it's hard to sort of incorporate that idea.
There is magnificence of Pat Cummins. There's the combination of pace and control of length.
My goodness. Himanish, why did you bring up Pat Cummins, man?
This is why I chose Pat Cummins. Exactly. I could have said Anderson in England on a cold day, but no, I said Pat Cummins.
This is like this partisan KD will come out when Pat Cummins is mentioned. That is the problem now.
No, but Sid, you can imagine a different kind of sport, right? Where there is no counting, there's no scorecard, and the scoreboard is really an ass, as Cardus said. And basically you appoint someone like Cardus as judge, and at the end of the game, or whenever the players get tired and they go home, you have someone like Cardus who says, I like player X. So therefore, today, player X is man of the match and his team is the winner. You can imagine that kind of game, no? But cricket is not that kind of game.
It is actually that kind of game is called Calvin ball. That Calvin has come up with, where he will change the rules as he pleases. And in the end, whoever he decides will be the winner of the game.
Yeah, but we all want Calvin ball, no? I mean, we all want cricket to be Calvin ball. I remember a time when, India losing used to be really depressing. I was in school at that time. But I remember feeling that way. I don't feel that way anymore because, I'm not in school anymore. So,
it's totally fine to be down when India loses. I don't think that is in any way related to the data point that we're making, right? I mean, it's totally fine to be...
It is related because when you are that upset, you don't really want to hear reasonable explanations. I understand that. You don't want to listen to reasonable expectations. You want to sort of, vent, and you want to be upset. That's okay. But the difference is between feeling that way and knowing that you're feeling that way, being self-aware that you are in that mood, and not being aware that you are in that mood and actually believing that the game is the way you feel it is in that moment.
The point about this counting thing, right, which KD says, I think people want counting to be there in cricket, but they want the scope of counting to be limited to what they care about. So I want you to count whether my team won or not. I want you to count if Kohli made runs and so on. If you go deeper than that, then I get uncomfortable. So counting is fundamental to cricket and whether you win or lose or what runs you make and so on. But the casual fan or the fan who doesn't care about numbers wants that scope to be limited to, win or loss, run or no run, and so on. If you go any deeper than that, then, I don't like it that much because there are some truths I don't like about that. I think counting is there, but you want it to be scope limited.
No, and you also want counting to validate what your ideas of the sport already are. And I think the problem starts coming when you are challenged and when you are told that what you're thinking is actually completely wrong. And that is when the discomfort becomes unbearable. It's like, what does this person know about the game? Have you ever played the game? Those are the kind of things that come in. What do you understand about players? What do you understand about psychology? What do you understand about human behavior? All those things will start coming in. When the fact is that, it's not like you're claiming to be an expert on multiple things. You're just saying, this is it. This is what I'm seeing. That's all.
Yeah. And there's this confusion, right? So if I describe something in the game, people who don't like it will confuse it for me telling the player what to do. And then they'll say, okay, have you played cricket? Have you done this? I'm just telling you what happened. And it's okay. I'm not making a moral judgment, or I'm not telling, Kohli to do this and do that. It's just a description. And people are very uncomfortable with that because it's an uncomfortable truth to face.
T20, it's even more exaggerated because it's because of, as we discussed and as KD has written, the projection of cricket on T20, the projection of test cricket and one-day cricket on T20 is so much that many people are refusing to see the fundamental distinction between the format like T20 and a format like one-day cricket, and definitely a format like test cricket. So they are unwilling to make that switch. So for them, when a team is 150 for 2 in 18 overs, they are still unwilling to see how this is a really bad approach to a T20 game, or a suboptimal approach. I won't say bad, a suboptimal approach to a T20 game compared to being 150 for 7 in 18 overs. A lot of the problem here is also that this availability of data and all the things that are available is so lopsided that, the players and teams obviously have tens of thousands of bits that they can work on for their games. Then you have this second order of people who actually KD and Himanish and things, who have made an attempt to get this data from in whatever way possible by scraping it out of scorecards, getting ball by ball data, trying to, getting all the Hawkeye data, line and length, etc. And then you have people like, me, who are generally aware of what player people have, but don't exactly know what they have. And then you have other people who are not at all aware. I'm sure there are many lay viewers who don't really know what is available. I'm not sort of blaming anybody here. I'm just saying that the nature of availability is so lopsided, and it's not like TV is making any great attempt to, mainstream these things, this way of thinking or this thought. So the way the players and coaches and teams are talking about the games are now becoming completely different from the way the lay fans are talking about the game, because the lay fans are still that behind. Is that a issue, Himanish?
I've been thinking about this, and I don't. So from the perspective of the players and the coaches, right? Why would this be an issue from their perspective? What is the incentive for BCCI or a cricket board or Hawkeye to make this data open? They don't care about the romantic aspect of, players will discuss it, fans will discuss it. So from that perspective, there is no importance to this. But from the fans' perspective, I think it's very important to have better data so that debate is improved, right? You already see it with Crickmetric. So Crickmetric, if you don't know, they provide a sort of a stats guru for T20 data. So I already see a non-zero number of people using Crickmetric data, because it tells you that, Kohli against leg break is this much, off break is this much, and so on. So there is a non-zero, number of people already accessing that data and already using it in their debates on Twitter and online and so on and so forth. And that's why it's important. Now, whether or not you should care for fan discourse, is a broader philosophical point. Should you care about what fans are doing? I don't know. Yeah. But definitely, there is a gulf between the availability and not just the availability, the concept of bringing this data into the mainstream and telling people that this is how we use it, or this is how you should look at the game through this prism, is lacking in cricket. Because cricket is a very disorganized sport, right? You don't have a central body like ICC is a bunch of like clubs. So, and most of it is driven by broadcasters, right? And broadcasters have no incentive to do anything, right? So the major broadcaster is Star. They don't do anything because they have so many ads. They don't have time to analyze the game. So, yeah.
So there will be the other side of the story, which is exactly around incentives. Because if you talk to people who are in the broadcasting thing, who are either the producers or assistant producers, who try to put in stats and stuff like that, if they have analysis shows, they had this whatever dugout during IPL where players were generally describing games and whatnot. Their thing is that the engagement or the numbers that they are seeing is very low, right? We had this conversation with Gaurav as well when we were talking about fantasy games and whatnot. And we were thinking, why were there not much of, tournament level fantasy games? Why is daily fantasy so rampant? Because of the ease of use, right? Tournament fantasy, you have to worry about a lot of stratagems and a lot of data calls that you have to take over a course of 60 games in IPL. Whereas, in daily fantasy, you can just come and pick your favorite player and then go on with life. So while I do agree that there is a gulf between what is available and what is presented is being dictated upon how people perceive the game or what is the incentive of presentation.
No, but the debate then is clearly there is no financial incentive to bring in more analysis. So does a broadcaster have a responsibility to try and bring this sort of discourse in to move that change, right? Because they're the only ones who can move this change. So do they have a responsibility to include these things in their broadcast to begin a conversation, even at the cost of financial loss or whatever? Like, I don't know. Yeah. So that's the whole debate, right? Like, recently, they've started showing this ball pace loss of the pitch. So, 10, 15 people have noticed it online, and it's an important metric. It's a useful metric. So, it's their responsibility to bring in these little nuggets so people start conversations. Now, whether they feel it's their responsibility or not, I don't know. So that's the whole debate around the philosophy of what a broadcast is really in cricket. Because no one else drives conversation like a broadcast does. Cricinfo doesn't drive conversation because people don't read. People watch. So, yeah.
See, also for a broadcaster, it's a very dicey situation to be in because, talking about all this will also mean questioning Kohli's approach to T20 and that is directly against what their bosses would ever want them to do. Because, Kohli drives engagement. Kohli brings in audiences. Yeah. So the moment
that's
commentators...
That's fair. Yeah.
And it used to happen with Sachin also before. They don't have any
incentive. Yeah.
So when Sachin was towards the end of his career, Tendulkar, many people didn't want to question his place on the side because there was so much riding on it for the broadcast and all. How many commentators, did? And Sanjay Manjrekar is still living with the fact that he spoke about Tendulkar and all back in 2006, even though, that at that particular point of time, it was a perfectly valid line of thing. It wasn't like only Sanjay Manjrekar was talking about it. He said elephant in the room, which then made people think he's calling Tendulkar an elephant and all, which I mean, there is only so far that you can go with logic when it comes to all this. So anyway, that's a different point. But, Kartikeya, still anything to add to the broadcast aspect of it?
No, I think broadcasters want to make money. They're going to do whatever makes them more money. That's their job, no? Because they're paying lots of money for the broadcast, for the privilege of being able to broadcast. So they want to get a return on their investment. I don't think it's reasonable to expect them to be like, educators or anything like that, unless it is in their interest to educate. It is not at all clear that it is. If anything, I think their incentives run in the opposite direction. They want, if you sort of plot the graph of fans going from, the most casual to the most serious, the biggest numbers are on the casual end of that spectrum. and the most obsessive ones are very few, right? So if you build a broadcast, you want to build a broadcast which brings in more and more of the casual fans. And for that, Kohli is priceless. The fact that he's married a very famous actor and so on and so forth is absolute gold. And so that is, ironically, they are acting on data. They are extremely cold-blooded, rational business decisions.
The only broadcaster who I can see even anywhere remotely having the thing is like the state-owned, state-funded broadcaster like a BBC or a ABC Radio in Australia or something.
Sky
like that,
also
right?
does it very well.
Yeah,
but Sky has
does
the
it,
time
even
to
though,
do it.
Yeah, they do it even though they don't have the necessary incentive to do it. They still do, because they have commentators who seem to want to go a little, want to peel the layers at least, if not anything else. But yeah, BBC or an ABC at least has, they're state funded. Like what? You at least have that little bit of, you don't have anything like in your way, but they also have to cater to market forces. So in the end, it is all that. Now, okay. So as we wrap up this conversation, I also want to talk about, where data is at the moment in terms of, cricket and where it is headed. Like, what do you think over the next, say, 5-6 years, where are we going to go in terms of what we're going to have? Is, biomechanical data going to be a big deal? What do you think are the ways in which we can better understand the sport in which it's going? It's a different question whether the data will even be available, but one can always hope.
Yeah, so this Hawkeye data is a breath of fresh air, right? Because it really describes what the ball is doing at all points. Now, there's multiple sort of layers that you can link it with. So Hawkeye data describes the ball. Then you also have shot type data, which Opta records, for example. When you merge these two, you are basically, and so like we don't have fielder data right now, but when you merge these three, you're essentially quantifying everything that's happening on the field on every ball through pitching, hitting, and so on. So I think the maturation of these three kinds of data and the merging of these data, which has already been done by CricViz, I think, at a certain level, is really helping us understand. It'll like get better in the next few years. I don't expect Hawkeye data to be available to the public because I don't think Hawkeye has an incentive to do that. Hawkeye spend a lot of money recording these balls, putting up these cameras. I don't see an incentive for them to put it up, openly. So this thing, and secondly, I think in terms of the scoring numbers, right? In terms of things like RA and Misbah and Jogi and impact and all, I think it's fairly well understood now. Now, the only thing which remains is to sort of try and quantify second order effects. Like, for example, if I bowl Bumrah in the 10th over, and if I don't bowl him after that, the fact that Bumrah has 3 overs left at the back end, how does it affect the scoring rate of the chasing team? Now, this is a second order effect, which is hard to quantify. So in my head, this is a good project to sort of focus on because teams, think about these things and it's hard to quantify. The other thing, which is, I think should be, and it's already happening. I know someone at CricViz who's doing this. The other thing is how you quantify matchups. So if I have the record for Shami and I have the record for, let's say, De Kock, when they meet up, what is the matchup expected to be? And that's a hard problem. So people are working on this. So that's one thing. The other realm, I think now, will be biomechanical data because hopefully T20 in the next 10 years will evolve to such a point that you want to optimize everything. So now you won't just record results. You will record how exactly the body is doing what it's doing and how you can optimize that. So biomechanics of fast bowling, spin, hitting, how you can improve on that is the future, I think. I don't know how long it will take. Cricket is a very archaic sport in many respects. So I don't know. So, but yeah, these 3-4 things I think are the main thing. But yeah, this availability of Hawkeye data has really improved how we describe the game. Because now you can actually plot where the ball is and what it's doing. And that's very important for describing the game. I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't know if it'll become public. I don't see media houses using it. Like, for example, Cricinfo, I think, tried to get a contract with Hawkeye, but they didn't. So it's a tangle of legal issues and copyright issues and God knows what. So to expect it to percolate into the public discourse soon enough is not wise, but it's happening. People are going somewhere with it. But yeah, this is the broad 2-3 things that I think will happen within the next 10 years.
Sure. I mean, there will be all these new measurements, all these new things being recorded. That's all fine. I think I'm sort of less excited about those things. Firstly, because I think these things which are there is sort of a record which is useful for the public understanding of the game, and there is a record which is useful for private money decisions. And that second record, Hawkeye data or biomechanical data, is likely to stay privileged because if a IPL franchise or a 100 franchise or one of these people who are investing millions of dollars in the franchise are collecting this information to help them make better decisions about where to put their money and which players to invest in, then they're not likely to make that public. No, they're not likely to publish that. So I don't really have that much hope of that stuff becoming public. Whatever does become public will be sort of inadvertent, and it will be some sort of light version of whatever people have. Is there an incentive in cricket for something like MLB Statcast? I don't know, and I don't really care. But what I am interested in is that cricket has never had these judgment measurements. Control is the first judgment measurement that I know of, where they are evaluating, is the batter in control of the ball or not. It's a brilliantly elegant measurement because it captures something about the contest between bat and ball. It's based on a model of the contest between bat and ball, and it captures what it says it captures. See, so those types of measurements, I think attempted boundaries and stuff, they don't really require that much technology, but they do require scorers doing more work. And I hope that comes up because I'm interested in improving understanding of the game. I'm interested in understanding the game better. I'm interested in understanding why some things happen and why other things don't. Some things don't happen. Why is there so much fluctuation in certain bowlers' output, and why is there less fluctuation in other bowlers? That's an interesting question. And is that just to what extent is it noise, and to what is the relationship between actions and outcomes? That's something that I find interesting, because they're not the same thing. In the bowler bowls the ball and the batter plays it. Neither determines the outcome of the game, outcome of the delivery. Each is sort of contributing to the outcome in terms of by nudging the probability in one direction or the other. Right. So I'm interested in those types of measurements. I'm interested in interesting ways of modeling the game and building variables which sort of describe something based on that intuition. So yeah, you could do lots of heavy duty number crunching and all that, and that is not that hard to do. Nowadays your average PC can do a lot of heavy duty number crunching. As it is, it's not like there are millions and millions of games in cricket. The whole sort of database is about of all the cricket that's recorded is, I don't know, it's about 2 or 3 gigabytes. It's not a lot. So, it can be processed on a normal computer with normal RAM without too much trouble. So it's not really a big data problem as such. And the data is not growing at exponential speeds either. So look, this is not really about data. This is about models. This is about and what is your model of the game? What do you think is happening? And is your model of the game good? That's really the question that I want to answer. That is what public understanding is. So if your model of the game is that there are heroes and there are villains, and the heroes should be glorified and the villains should be abused, then fine, go with that. But if your model of the game is, well, these are extremely skillful professionals who are better at what they do than most of us will ever be at what we do, then you sort of feel an obligation to understand what they're doing. And that's, I think that's reasonable motivation to look into some of these things.
Conclusively, what I want to say is that people have different incentives for watching sport, and that is okay. Like, we want the conversation to involve more stats and all, and that's okay. Like, we are a small niche, and like, we'll hopefully get there someday, but it's okay that people want to watch the game as a drama or as a film or as a war or whatever.
Yeah, like in baseball, you have the whole sabermetricians, that category of people who are, totally into the stats. But you also have the other extreme of people who don't care and they are just watching for the fun of it and the emotions, whatever. They're not really, in fact, the sabermetric community is often gets a lot of, stick for just sticking to that. So that's fine. No, the thing about the Kartikeya's point is very interesting, in that systematic observations of the game, like the control metric, for instance, and other things like attempted boundaries or attempted big hits or whatever. But there are very, very few people who can actually do this. So the TV production obviously is one of them that can do it, because they're showing every ball and they can actually have somebody to systematically record a lot of things. Then there are people like Cricket4 who do ball by ball commentary, but a lot of the Cricket4 ball by ball commentary is off TV, because it's, because of they don't rely on the internet on grounds very often. Earlier, back in the day, they used to actually do BBB, ball by ball commentary from the ground, but then it became too much of a pain with internet issues. So they do it from TV. So while they can record the control measure when you actually see the ball being bowled to the batter, they can't record something like what is the field for every ball of a day's play, for instance, because you can't see that on TV. And unless TV shows it, Cricket4 can't record it. But so what may tend to happen is that a lot of the data, systematic measurements that you will need to be at the ground to see, the only people who can do it is the TV production, because they actually have camera crews there. And they are not, when they don't have the incentive to release it or to share it, and they want to be proprietary, then it's going to be a problem to have that going on. So it's going to be hard for that kind of data to come through. Though I think people like Cricket4 will hopefully continue to do things like this off TV as much as they can to help us increase the understanding of the game. But yeah, I mean, overall, I don't think there has ever been a more exciting time when it comes to all this sort of data and cricket data that is available and description in cricket. It has really helped me to read articles by people like Himanesh and Kartikeya and everyone else who is working in this field. I mean, CricViz posts some great stuff. There are other people. I can link to quite a few pieces on this, and there's a lot to learn if you keep an open mind. And again, I'm the kind of person who has written hundreds of articles about how one feels while watching the game, but that doesn't mean that I have to close my mind to the actual numbers that all of these people are recording and writing about. You can do both, and there is absolutely no harm in writing about what you feel and also thinking about what is happening. So these are two ways in which you can watch it. So yeah, I will urge all of you to read some of the pieces I linked and to look out for these things in the future. And if you're so inclined, and if you decide to start a blog or start a podcast about this, more the merrier. Anyway, please send us your feedback. We are 81allout.com. You can send us comments. We are at 81allout on Twitter. Please review, rate, subscribe to our podcast. The more people who review us, the more it's easier for others to find. So that'll be great. We also, as I said, are republishing classic works of cricket writing and cricket literature. So I'll link Cricket Beyond the Bazaar and War Minus the Shooting. So please pick those up. And we'll see you maybe in a week or so for another episode of the podcast. Thank you, Himanish. Thank you, Eddie, and thank you, Ashoka.
India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wild.